So hi, I am Dr. Erica Womack, and I am the founder and CEO of Idlewood Company. And Idlewood Company is a data equity firm, and what we do is specialize in helping nonprofits to better understand their data so that they're able to create equitable outcomes for the populations that they serve. So the way I like to think about equity is in two different ways. I like to think about it as an outcome and as a process. And so an outcome in the sense that equity being a condition that is reached when structural barriers such as race, gender, sexuality, those structural barriers are removed so that they are not determining factors in someone's outlook, success, opportunities in life. And so that's achieving or reaching equity. I like to also think of it as a process in terms of data equity. And so that's the work, again, that Idlewood Company does. And so in that sense, equity is used, or the data is used in a way where individuals are treated justly and fairly in terms of how the data is collected, analyzed, and used. So with the RISE program, our task is really to define the data, to collect the data, to analyze the data, to leverage the data so that we are creating those equitable outcomes for the families, for the educators, for the providers that are in the RISE program. The idea with building the equity team is that you're bringing together all of these different voices, experts, perspectives, so that they are able to weigh in on the data as well, how it's collected, how it's analyzed, how it's used. And then our work together now, we are hoping that it is a part of what the county, what the commissioner's goal is that education is a birthright by 2050. So the work that we're doing has this long-lasting, decades-long impact.
For children whose English is not their first language, those first 5 years are crucial because you're trying to have a good foundation for the behavioral years. So when you're learning a second language, it's important to you either cultivate both languages simultaneously, like in my personal experience growing up in Puerto Rico, you're learning both languages at the same time. So being able to have that foundation allowed me to later on be able to pursue higher education, have more opportunities because you're cultivating both languages in contrast to focusing just on one. It's how do we keep in mind the language that they're learning in school while simultaneously the one that they're learning at home. And it's kind of like, how do you bridge that gap between moving them forward and getting them ready for what their career looks like, but at the same time, not leaving behind what they're bringing from home. And it's kind of like seeing it as a benefit. I think that when we're looking at languages, and it happens to me personally, I think of being bilingual as kind of like a negative connotation. I get anxious, I switch back to default, and I speak Spanish because it's comfort for me. So how do we reframe that to see it as, for kids, like a superpower? And saying you know what, I can communicate with more people, I'm able to kind of reach so many audiences, and how do I see that moving forward? So I think that going back to that foundational 5 years, it is important that you're able to cultivate both English and whatever other languages that you speak. Because think about it, as a kid, and I'm like, Marvel, DC, I remember thinking, I'm like, hey, knowing a second language, it is a superpower because it gives you the opportunity to talk to more people, to go out there, and then if you look down the road, scholarships and employment opportunities. So whenever I was talking to my students, I was like, don't be ashamed because you make a mistake when you're speaking English. You're able to do that in multiple languages. So you can make a mistake in English and in Spanish. So I had a professor that referred to exams and tests, learning celebrations, and that was the one that, look, I'm getting goosebumps. Because in your brain, it was like, I am celebrating my learning in school and not just being tested, and I'm gonna freak out and get stressed about.
I get to celebrate.
And it was, exactly, and it was like, you know what, I kind of like that.
I was on a waiting list, and at that time, it took a lot. I think I stopped taking certain medications that I was supposed to be taking because I couldn't afford them. We were late on a car note, which is kind of scary. We got it back together. I always take care of business first, so my house, I was never worried about being homeless or anything like that. My rent was always paid, but I did have problems paying my electricity bill, so I split it. Sometimes I'll pay like just, enough so they won't cut it off. But after I received the grant, I was able to make some changes in what I was doing. I haven't missed a car note since then, so that's good. You know how you make it to a certain level and you kind of get, you think you could catch your breath and then you're like, oh no. So you're just back down to making pretty much the same you were making before because of all the extra bills that are now coming out. So that is like a fear of mine, is like still being in the same position while making more money, but then having these extra bills that are coming out and kind of sucking up the benefits of making more money. Like when I would pick him up, he wouldn't worry about snack. He wouldn't worry about washing his hands or anything else. He'd just be worried about running out of there to get to me. But after me dropping him off and picking him up, he is now able to just go in there and have fun. So when I pick him up, he seems like he's having a really good time in daycare. I read this little paper. One time, the daycare teacher, she had a water table already out. So that made the transition so much easier dropping him off. So as soon as I dropped him off, I'm thinking he's gonna have a meltdown, oh Lord. And he saw that water table, he took off. I'm like, okay, make it easy for me.